Hello and welcome to another edition of Building a Better Life here on Smooth 88.1 WHOV. I am delighted that you're going to be spending some time with us today, and you will not be disappointed. Whether you are at home, in your car, or at the office, this show has something to help you improve the quality of your life. And today we're going to be celebrating Foster Care Month and having a deep dive into the foster care system. We're going to be talking about an upcoming stage play, Crowns, the 200 Plus Men's annual Scholars Breakfast, and we're going to end today talking about your prosperity and how you can move from lack to abundance. But we're going to, as I mentioned, begin today by talking about foster care. The national statistics are pretty alarming, as each year more than 600,000 children experience foster care here in the United States. But here to shed some light on the growing need for more foster care parents and the system itself is Carol Baskerville, the foster care trainer and recruiter for the Newport News Department of Human Services. Welcome to the show today, Carol.
Thank you, Ms. White. Thank you for having me.
This is such an important topic, and I am glad that we have you in the studio to talk about it, as well as the Family Services Supervisor with the Newport News Department of Human Services, Ms. Selena Merrill. Thank you for joining us today, Selena.
Thank you.
Selena is trying to stay in the background here in the studio, but we're going to make sure that we bring her into this conversation as well. But let's begin by just talking about foster care. What is foster care?
It's a temporary out-of-home placement for children who are in need of safety, well-being, and permanency.
So it's intended to be temporary.
That's the key word, temporary. It is just supposed to be temporary. The goal is to reunite the kids with their family as soon as possible, sooner than later. The next step, if we can't reunite them with their families, then we're looking to place them with a relative. And then as a last resort, then adoption. But our main goal is always to reunite the children with their families that they were removed from.
Because sometimes there are temporary situations that families may experience where there's a need just for help. And making sure that children are safe, well cared for, nourished, not abused. You know, getting them out of some of those situations is really necessary to their long-term well-being. So what is the process for selecting a family who can really just host the child under some temporary circumstances?
We call it ARW. We are looking at a family's ability, resources, and willingness, and that's what basically where we look at that as the whole assessment. Do you have the ability to be a foster parent? Do you have the resources? And then you also, on top of that, the willingness, because just because you have the ability, the means to actually be a foster parent doesn't mean you have the willingness. And as well as just because you have the ability and the willingness doesn't necessarily mean you have the resources, such as space in your home, financially set to take a child in the home, because foster care is definitely not what people may assume a get-rich scheme. It is definitely not that, and so you have to be financially stable for yourself and your family before we will move forward in the foster parent approval process.
Now, is there a certain income level that you must achieve in order to qualify?
Absolutely not. What we're looking at when it comes to income is that you have more income than outcome. There is no set income. There's no guideline to say you have to make a certain amount of money, no certain tax bracket. We just want to make sure that you are set financially to take care of your family needs without the added benefit as a foster care payment, because that means that that's going to reduce the stress that you may endure by adding another person to your household.
You know, you're right. It has been used by some as an income stream, you know, to support the rest of the household. So I'm glad that that is a myth that you're really addressing, that it should not be used that way. And under circumstances, if you find that, what happens?
Well, normally we can kind of sense it at the very beginning. There's things, being in this position for so many years, I find little red flags that made me kind of aware of that this individual is not necessarily here to be a true foster parent. It's normally found in the questions that they may ask us when they're initially interested in becoming a parent. Well, how much money do you make from being a foster parent? When that question comes up first, that's a red flag for me. Typically, and it doesn't happen a lot, believe it or not, But when it does happen, then you find out from gathering more documentation, information from them that this is really not for them. But for the most part, that's not the person that's coming to us. They truly want to foster. They understand that it may take more than what they're getting from us financially.
Are there other resources that can help, individuals who take on this responsibility because they do want to make a difference? They're coming at it from the right place. They have the heart to give. They have, income, but may also need some additional support.
Absolutely. The first thing when you first starting to think about becoming a foster parent is do your own research. Research it. Find out just by looking on the internet. A lot of resources on the internet that can just give you the initial information that you may need to even consider being a foster parent. Then from there, you can contact me at the Newport News Department of Human Services, and I'm transparent, and I'm going to give you that information. I'm not always going to just sugarcoat it. I'm going to tell you the ins, the outs, the good, the bad, everything about being a foster parent. Then also talk to friends and family who's already been a foster parent. That's probably going to be your best resource right there, your friends and family who's already been a foster parent. And so from there, you go through the training. Just because you go through the training doesn't necessarily mean you're committing to being a foster parent. It is giving you the information that you need to assess further if this is the right thing for you and your family. And that's another key thing. It's not just about the individual person or the couple. It's about the family, the whole family as a dynamic. It's the whole family.
The whole unit.
Mm-hmm.
What other things do you look for in trying to identify, someone who would be an ideal foster parent?
Someone who has patience, someone who has humor. That's very big. You have to have a sense of humor. Someone who is a team player. A lot of people don't understand that when you become a foster parent, you're actually becoming a professional member of the team. And so you have to be ready to be a team player. You have to be willing to collaborate with the department as well as with the biological families, because it is some expectations that you work with the biological families. You have to have an understanding that things you've done in the past doesn't necessarily work today. So you have to be flexible. You have to be able to compromise when you need to compromise. Pick and choosing battles is important as well.
Now, does the family get to choose the child that's coming into their home? For example, if they have a preference for male, female, or a certain age range, are those choices options for parents? Or?
Absolutely. Okay. And how it works is that when we have what's called a mutual family assessment, which sometimes more commonly known as a home study. But it's called a mutual family assessment because it's a partnership between us and the family that we're looking to approve to be foster parents. And what that important piece is being for the family to be able to tell us, this is the type of child that we would like to work with, the gender, the race. They tell us all of that up front. Now, at the same time, we have a certain population of children that we really need homes for, and so we also very transparent with our parents that we're working for, that these are the families that we need, these are the kids that we have. So they may have a preference, but we may also call them if the child is not necessarily falling under their preference, but we've seen something in them to say, you know what, they may still be able to handle this particular child.
We've often heard that older children are much harder to place when it comes to adoption, and I know foster care sometimes leads to adoption. What are some other barriers that you find in placing kids who may not fit that perfect template?
Right. It takes someone to be understanding, be willing to be trained, and just be open to working with an older population. Older children, more times than not, are just words on paper. They are typically normal, quote unquote, normal children. But when you have to document, you normally document all the significant events, and it may not always be the most positive. So, and then when you hear horror stories, they only hear those horror stories. They don't hear the positive, the strengths about the children. And so a lot of times we just encourage our families to be open to understanding that these kids are not as bad as they are presented to be. They are smart individuals. They are someone looking for stability. They're looking for love. They want the same thing as the younger kids. They just may take a little longer to really get there because they've endured a lot longer, maybe abuse, neglect, whatever the case may be. They're not hard to work with. Yes, there is a small percentage of children that do come with a lot of baggage, juvenile delinquency, criminal involvement, yes. But at the same time, a lot of those kids' issues are more so in the community and not necessarily in the home that they're being placed with. And so we just want those individuals to truly just be open, and maybe at some point get comfortable with working with the older kids, and we provide a lot of different resources. We have case managers at the Newport News Department of Human Services who are there solely to support our foster parents, especially when they have children who have some significant issues and needs that needs to be met. So they're there just to really support the family to try to minimize any type of disruption that may come up.
You know, it's wonderful to know that those additional resources are there to assist, but so many children go through trauma in their lives, and we're seeing that more and more. And what it takes is a loving home and environment and an acceptance of that child, whether it's an older child or a younger child, giving that child a chance to demonstrate that they want to be in an environment where there's love, because they come from so many situations that are dysfunctional. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity sometimes for them to find that place of love where they can grow and truly become, reach their potential.
Right. Well, we're moving towards what's called a trauma-informed agency. So we provide a lot of trainings to our foster parents as well as to our staff on trauma. And so that's the start, is preparing our foster parents to work with children who experience trauma. And I just try to remind them and educate them that coming into foster care itself is trauma. It's a form of trauma. There is traumatizing to be uprooted from something that they know, whether it's considered safe, unsafe, is their norm.
Absolutely.
It's normal for them. It's what's been normal for all their life. And so they have to have the initial understanding that when they come into foster care, we can't just assume that they think they're safe, and that we are the superhero that just all of a sudden provides them a home. It takes a while. It's
absolutely.
a process. When they come into care, one of the examples I always give is that you have a child who's been in a home who has been around domestic violence, who spends hours at night trying to fall asleep, but they can't because there's loud music, yelling, arguing. And then they come from there, and then they come to your home, and it's quiet, stability. Everybody sleep by 10. You can't assume that they think that they're safe because they come into this environment. It's different. It's not their norm. And so it's just a lot of training and understanding about what trauma is, how it impacts the child, because our trauma may not necessarily be the same trauma for that child.
Absolutely, absolutely. As you were talking, I was thinking back to even when my children were younger. A lot of times, even being around people that they had seen once or twice but didn't know very well, also always took an adjustment. You know, children don't just automatically, bond with individuals that they don't know. They're comfortable in their own environment, even sometimes if there is trauma, but because that is what they know. So it takes a child a minute to really get to know another adult and to feel comfortable in a new environment.
And it may even take longer than we think as adults. It may take a child months, maybe a year before they get to that point where they truly feel comfortable. They have experienced and endured so much trauma. It takes a while to kind of undo that, per se, because they're not going to forget the trauma. But for them to feel comfortable around another adult, to be around one's family and feel secure in that they belong where they are, because they're dealing with a lot of loss.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now you have an upcoming open house. Tell us about that event.